This is TWiT.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am Pruitt, and I want to share my quick thoughts on the Canon R5 C, the hybrid mirrorless camera from the folks at Canon. Now, yes, I am a Canon fanboy, and I was just super duper thrilled to be able to get my hands on one of these cameras to try out. And I'm going to tell you, this camera is, it is damn near perfect. Damn near perfect. There's just one or two things, really just one big thing that bugs me the most on it, but we'll get into that momentarily. Anyway, let me give you a quick rundown of the tech specs on it. I'm not going to go too deep and thorough in all of that because this camera's been out for a while and you've probably already seen all of that. You're getting a 45 megapixel full frame sensor on this, mirrorless that is. You're able to shoot about 20 frames per second for stills. You can shoot up to 8K. There's some caveats on that. So if you want to shoot HD, you got that. If you want to shoot slow motion, like 120 frames per second, you can in HD. You can also do that in 4K, 60 frames a second. You can even shoot 60 frames a second in 8K. Yeah, but there's still a catch on that. We'll get to that momentarily. Now, what this camera is in particular, it's a hybrid. You're going to get your 45 megapixel stills to be able to take, beautiful portraits, landscapes, what have you. But if you want to flip over to the video side, you can. And it's just a toggle of a switch to say, hey, let me jump into video mode. Now, why is that? Well, if you think back to the Canon R5, the camera that came out about 2 years ago, maybe it was a year and a half, something like that, it was able to do the same thing. You can shoot stills that are super high resolution, and you can also shoot video up to 8K. But when you tried to shoot video on that camera, it caused some problems. It caused so many problems where Canon had to even update the firmware to stop it from having all of the overheating issues. And, that's fine. But again, that is 8K being filmed on that camera that's really not built for that type of processing. It's nice that it could do it, but for an extended amount of time, I wouldn't really bank on it, So then comes the Canon R5 C, C as in cinema. So with this camera, you're pretty much getting an R5 body, but it's a little bit thicker, a little bit on the chunky side. And it's giving you a little bit more of the cinema camera capabilities and feel. So you have some extra ports on there. You get your standard CF Express and SD card, UHS 2 SD card slot, but you also get an HDMI port, which is a micro HDMI. Why not get a full size HDMI? And then you also get a time code generator for people that are doing multicam stuff and want to be able to sync up to time code. And of course, you get your standard microphone and headphone jack. All of that's great, just like what a typical cinema camera should have, right? Okay, so what happens when this camera goes from the portrait mode to the video mode? As you switch the toggle to video mode, you get a whole new interface. It's not the same menu system that you would find on the R5 or the R6. This is more of the menus that you would find on, say, the C70, which was previously demoed on the network by me. And it's a very fine user interface, easy to navigate through. You can tap through it on the LCD if you need to, or just use the different buttons on the camera, which are laid out perfectly fine. Because again, this is the body of an R5, which has great ergonomics. With that said, once you get into video mode, there are some things that are going to change. You do not have in-body image stabilization, also known as IBIS, on this camera. And most people freak out when they hear, oh man, I'm paying $4,000 or $5,000 for a camera and it doesn't have IBIS. That's a problem. And I've said before, a lot of cinema cameras don't have stabilization on it. You have a lens potentially that has stabilization, but most of the time, the cinema cameras do not have stabilization because they tend to be a little bit heavier and you don't really have to worry about it as much. So what Canon has done is implemented a digital image stabilization similar to what you would find in your smartphones. And it's better than that, but it's not necessarily great. But if you want to try it out, hey, have at it. I typically disabled it and just deal with it myself in post. But that's up to you if you want to do that. Now, so there's no stabilization. Let's talk about the actual recording process on this. Again, previously the R5 was known to be a very, very hot camera, so it had overheating problems, and that has been addressed to an extent. But this one is you're not going to have to deal with the heat quite as much. This camera does get hot, but it has a much larger heat-seeking fan on it now to help dissipate the heat that's being generated from that sensor. Does it work? Yes, it does work. If you can get it to run for a long time. I took this camera out to the track to film the Hardhead and Little Weirdo at their track meet, and it was a bright sunny day, quite hot here in Northern California that day. So it was definitely going to be tested with dealing with the heat, just ambient heat outside. And the camera did get hot. There was a few times where I'm holding the camera in my hand and it felt warm, but it kept chugging along until it just got a little too hot, and of course it had to shut down. But that's any camera, whether you have a fan or not. If it's just extreme heat, your camera's going to get too hot and have to shut down. So that was something that I can't really fault on Canon for that. It was just extreme issues. Now, when it was in an issue in an environment that wasn't quite as hot, yes, it was totally fine, and I could run it for as long as the battery would stand it. That's a big problem right there, the battery. Again, I love how this camera feels. I love the image quality of it. I love the capabilities in the menus. But man, the battery, these LPE6N batteries that Canon are offering with it, they are horrible trying to drive this camera. If you're going to use it to just shoot stills, yeah, the batteries are fine. The second you turn it into a video camera, dude, you're not getting any kind of power out of this thing. As a matter of fact, it's underpowered running those batteries. Yeah, you can shoot HD, you can shoot 4K, but you're only going to get roughly half an hour of juice on one of those battery packs. So you'll need to get some sort of extended battery, which Canon does offer. Or if you're in the cinema world, you're probably used to rigging up a camera with a cage, something like this here. This is a half cage for one of my cameras, but you can get a rig like that and attach, a DTAP battery of some sort, some external battery power to power up the Canon R5 C. So you're going to be able to get extended time. Plus, it's also going to open up the other video capabilities. Yeah, the other video capabilities. Because if you're running just the standard LPE6N batteries, you can't get the full capability of HK because those batteries just don't have enough juice to push the processing on that. So it already has it locked down because it doesn't have enough power. I didn't like that at all. You telling me I have a camera that is 8K, 60 frames per second, but then when I fire it up and try to put it in that mode, it's not letting me shoot that. I have a problem with that. You have to get an additional set of batteries that can power it up. If you don't want to use like a DTAP battery, you can power it with the USB-C port on the side of it. Just get you a battery bank that's got enough juice and it will power with that. So I tried it with one of my little battery packs. Everybody's got those and it worked. Wasn't ideal, but it worked. So my approach regarding this thing is if I know I'm going to do a lot of cinema with it, just go ahead and order something like one of the small rig cages on it. You could even do a half cage like this or a full cage. That way you'll be ready to go and not necessarily adding too much weight to the body, just in case you only want to use it as stills for a particular project or shoot. Okay, so now let's talk about the actual video files on here. You're going to be able to shoot in all of those super high resolutions, but it's 422 10-bit or up to 12-bit. You get Canon Cinema Light. I can never get those words out. And you also have the capability of shooting in Canon C-Log 2 or C-Log 3. And the C-Log 2 and C-Log 3 is great for people that are into doing some really hardcore color grading. It's pretty flexible footage. C-Log 3, it's supposed to be easier than C-Log 2, but I've had a couple times where it didn't really, I just had to push it back to C-Log 2 and work with it, and it got a little bit easier for me. Shooting in 8K though, when you have enough power, it is amazing. The detail in 8K is just ridiculous. I shot some footage of the Chief TWiT one day in the studio. He wasn't paying much attention, but it just blew my mind how much detail I could get just from standing, you know, roughly 20 feet away from him, and then get in the post and zoom in on that footage and still see all the details of his face and so forth. It was quite nice. Now, granted, it was a little bit overexposed and had a little bit too much highlights, but that was my fault. That wasn't the camera's fault. That was all on me. I should have been using the actual monitors that are built into this screen, to the LCD, that lets you see the waveform and see if you're clipping your highlights and things like that. But anyway, yeah, this Canon R5 C is a heck of a camera. It is almost perfect. I just wish that you could get this thing to be ready to go right out the box as far as all of the features, and not have to think about, you know what, I need to buy additional batteries, you know, I need to get a D-tap battery or something like that. I hate that that's something that you have to consider if you're going to go into the video side of it and expect to get the full capabilities of it. You can order this camera online right now, body only, for $4,499. We will put a link in the show notes just in case you're curious and interested. I highly recommend it myself. Again, I'm not someone that's really crazy about in-body stabilization. I know that's something that most people really care about, but I don't care about it that much. Having the full frame sensor is great, or if I want to shut it down to shoot in a Super 35 sensor, that's great too. I love having that option and capability. But yeah, check us out on we're in the show notes. We'll put a link there in the show notes where you can place an order for it. I want to give a shout out to the folks at Lensrentals. That's lensrentals.com, because they sent this to me to play with and allowed me to play with it for quite a long time. So, hey, Lensrentals, thank y'all so much for all the support of me and my shows here on the network. Okay, everybody, that's going to do it for me. Thanks for watching. Make sure you check out my show, Hands on Photography, where I share different tips and tricks to help make you a better photographer and post-processor. And yeah, like, share, subscribe, all that magical stuff. We'll see you next time.